the LED lights behind the speaker grills. Now, some of you might be wondering, why am I not talking about the wiring as I go? And the reason why is I want to put everything in and then talk about all the wiring and all the recommendations at once. So let's take this DMD panel off and show you what I'm doing on this one. Now for my speaker grills, I went with the stern kind of style, rectangular ones, but if you have a round one, your job might actually be a lot easier. You can go ahead and buy a certain size diameter addressable ring that goes around your speaker. Just buy the right one that is not sitting on the cone of the speaker, and then all you gotta do is glue gun that down around the outside of your speaker and you're good to go. Now for me, I've got these 3D printed ones, and they were nice enough to have two little holes here for the wires to be able to come in so that I can glue gun the addressable strips in here along the perimeter. So all I got to do is lay out these holes here so I know where that hole's got to be. And then maybe make a mark out here so I know where I got to actually clear it to as well. And then I got to take the speaker grill out and then basically drill some holes or use the Dremel tool again so I got some room for wires to get in. All right, for the LED strips for this guy, I'm going to use the 60 LEDs per meter, but this is a massive long, like 18-foot long piece. So this is hopefully enough for the speakers and all the undercab as well. So I'm going to put it in here. However, this end doesn't fit through. So the very first thing I got to do is void the warranty and clip this off. If I clip it there, it should be somewhat easy to put back on though. And since I'm going to have to solder something back onto it, might as well strip the insulation off first. Make my life easier. That, and might as well do this one for later. So while I'm stripping this, this is actually the input, so the arrows are going this way on the strip. And I'm going to do both the left and the right panels the same way so that I don't kind of worried about maybe when the patterns turn on, that they turn on differently or something like that. So hopefully they just go the same pattern. All right, now this is going to go through into this hole. Now some people might want to kind of paint this first. I kind of worry that if I paint it and I glue gun it to the paint, that the paint might come off. So I'm going to glue gun it in here, and then when I go to paint it, I'll just put some masking tape over the LEDs, paint it, and then when I'm done I can peel it off, kind of like a mask. Now this is pretty rigid right at this wire part here, and I kind of want it to sit down a little better. Seems to stick out a bit here. This might be a candidate for using the Dremel to get it just a touch bigger in there for that to sit better, so I can go like this down. I'm going to peel this protective sticker back and we'll stick it down where I want it in here, and then whether it sticks or not to the 3D printed plastic, I'm going to glue gun it down in a bunch of spots so it for sure works. All right, get this to go in as far as possible, and then first LED. There you go, that actually seems like it sticks pretty nice. Now, I originally thought I would kind of just keep these flat and in the corners clip it and put in some little jumper wires to get the corner to clear, but I think I'm going to go right to the corner and just go around. I don't think that's going to make that big of a difference. All right, now I'm getting near to the end here. And I'm probably gonna get 1, 2, 3. We can squeak 4 LEDs on the way out. Now, I'm a little concerned if I have all corners have the lid up and then I skip the corner there though. So, yeah, not really much of a choice. So I'm gonna have to cut it right here, and hopefully I don't see a dead spot right in the corner there. I'm hoping maybe the light this way and that way will kind of fill in the corner. Guess we're gonna find out. So now we gotta cut right over the halfway point of that oval, so I can still continue with the strip and solder connections on both if I need to. Like that. Now, rather than stick this down right now, I think it'll be a lot easier to solder on the end connection. Now, the beginning connection, you got to make sure that your male and females are the right so that you can connect it to the other strips. I did buy a bag of these extensions. They come with a bunch of male and females as well as a bunch of wire here, so that's pretty cool. Now, the other thing is this side of the speaker grills is going to get attached to the next side. So there's kind of no point really to do the male and female connector on this piece. I might as well just run this kind of extension wire to the other one and put it in as one piece. There's no reason for this to actually come out after. To help these stick better, I'm going to tin these wires with some solder. That way when I go to put them together, it'll go easier. You always got to pre-think what you're doing here. So put some heat shrink tube on before so you can slide it on after you do your solder joints. Perfect. Okay, and then take that strip and strip the ends off and solder it to your 5 volt, your digital out, and your ground. And then you're going to take this end and you're going to pre-stick it through the hole there in the speaker grill, like that, and then you can stick the last little bit down. So there's the finished speaker grill. So power signal ground's coming in, going along outside, along the perimeter, and then when it comes back to the corner, it goes back out, and then this long strip's going to go to the other side. So the other one's going to be done exactly the same, so I'm not going to show that. Now, I'm actually pretty impressed of how sticky these are, but I know that these are going to get hot eventually and heat cycle, so they might come loose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my glue gun and very carefully kind of just tack it in a couple spots just to make sure this doesn't lift out. And I have heard that people can kind of make shift diffusers with glue guns. So this might be something I want to try on a kind of scrap LED. You can basically just make kind of blobs over the LED and it kind of acts like a diffuser. It's not quite see-through, right? So something to maybe if you want to try. Now, as I start wiring the LEDs for the other side off of this extension piece, I'm just going to continue where I snipped it in half there and go back in and do it the exact same pattern. So data in, along, and out. And then on the very end coming out, I'm going to put the male end, which is the one that needs to go into the next LED strip. All right, I did a little test fit and I came across a problem here. So one thing I didn't think of is where the wires are coming in on this side. They are wanting to go right here where this guide is for the hook for the DMD panel. Now, the original did only kind of go to somewhere about that long because it is really only meant for this. And especially with my design, it locks in on the bottom on this groove. So I did talk about it way back in a bunch of videos about maybe not even needing all this. So I guess it's come to that point. So I could either drill holes, but to make it a little bit easier, I think I'm just going to figure out where I need it. Just kind of above the holes here. Mark it, take this off, cut it, and then put it back in. All right, cool. That's the hard part done. Now we just got to do the underbody cab and the back of the cabinet. And I think that's going to be really easy because we're almost using the full length strips in those Musata diffuser mounts. We're going to be using those little screw-in brackets to hold it all in place. So that should be pretty easy. So let's do that now. For the undercab lighting, I'm going to put 60 LEDs on the left and the right, and then a little bit less on the ends. On one end of this strip, I'm going to put the female JST for the data coming in from the speaker panel. And then I'm probably going to just join the pieces with the connecting wires. And then the very last one, I'll put on a male JST connector just in case I want to add more. We are going to talk about wiring and fusing in a bit here, but I just want you to know what I'm doing here. Because these are the under cab lights, it's going to be awkward to try to solder stuff on the cabinet. So I've pre-put on my positive and negative wires as well as an inline fuse holder. So literally I've got my signal coming in on one side, data in to the front of the cab underneath, and then all the way back, and then this is going to go up to the power supply. Super awkward to film the under the cab LED install, so I've done it and I'm just going to recap it for you. So I've got my data coming in, goes down along that side for 60 LEDs. It has a short section at the front for 27 LEDs. Then it comes all the way back to this corner here for another 60 LEDs, and then it goes up in there up to the power supply for the power and the ground. All right, on to the last LED strips for the back of the back box. Now, my limiting factor in this is that I only have 1.5 more pieces of this Mutaba diffuser channel, so maybe it's a good thing because I'm limiting the amount of LEDs I'm going to put on the back because I'm already over 1,000 LEDs at this point, so probably a good thing. So I'm going to put a strip here, strip here, strip here. I'm gonna have to punch a hole, maybe 2 holes for power and signal into this, and then attach it. So let's go do it. Now that we have our strips and our matrix ready to go, we got to wire them up. Now you got a couple options. Option A is you could start taking all those male and female plugs and start clipping them together, and in essence making a very long LED strip. However, you're going to have 2 problems that you're going to run into. The first problem is what your microcontroller and octo board can actually handle. Now for the Teensy 3.2, you can handle 1100 LEDs per channel, and the octo board gives you 8 channels. Now, when you go all the way to the max limit on a channel, you are also asking that data to go a very long way along that data cable, and so that takes a certain amount of time. And what that means for lights is that when they start changing their patterns, that refresh rate is going to have to suffer. So as you get near the end, you're looking at about 30 hertz, and that's about half as fast as the TV, so we probably don't want that. So you're going to want to stay away from the max limit. Now, the other problem you're going to have is that when you inject power at the beginning of the strip, as those LEDs consume power, and there's a bit of voltage drop because of the copper tracing in the LEDs that can only carry so much power, eventually, roughly about 180 LEDs in, you're going to start noticing some issues with the lights. They tend to start changing colors. They go to a more like a red kind of hue, and then they just fade out till there's no lights being lit. And that's because of voltage drops. So what we have to do in that case is do something called power injection. And all you got to do is every 180 LEDs, and I would probably round that up or down so you can get on the end of a strip, you have another red positive wire and another black ground wire that you solder into the strip to inject power at those places. Now, you totally can do that for 1,000 LEDs. That is one option, but let me talk about what I'm going to do for mine. Now, because my cabinet has 1,111 LEDs and they're being powered by a 60 amp power supply, I'm going to actually separate them up into separate channels, and that will allow me to separately power each of them as needed. Now, the other thing that I'm going to do that a lot of people don't is I'm going to throw in a couple bucks worth of fuses, just some inline glass tube fuses. And the reason why is if there's anything going wrong in the future, something shorts out, instead of causing a fire and burning down my cabinet, I just blow a fuse and something stops working, and then I get in there and replace a 10-cent fuse after fixing what was wrong. So my verbal wiring diagram for my data and my power injection points are going to be as follows. I'm going to have 1 channel for my matrix, and because there's so many LEDs, I'm probably going to have 3 positive and negative injection points. I'm going to have another channel for my right side playfield strip, and power and data is going to only come in from the one end here. And then I'm going to put the left playfield side strip on another channel, so power and data once again comes in from here and goes down. And I'm doing that rather than just connecting data and power down here, so I've got less cables up here. And because this is 144 LEDs along here, I would have to inject power up at the front of the cab, and I don't want to have to run that wire. So just turn it around and make it a separate channel. And then for the rest of the LEDs, I thought I would do something different just so that you guys can understand how to put multiple things all on one channel in case that's what you want to do. So for the last channel, I'm going to have the data and power injection starting up at the speaker grills here. Goes to this one, goes to that one. Then it goes to the back of the back box on the sides, top and back down. And then it goes to the under the cab, along the side, along the front, and then ends all the way at the back. So I'm going to put all of that on one channel. Now to connect these strips to our power supplies, I'm going to be using 18 gauge red and black wire. I would not go any less than that because of the power that goes through there. And watch how long these are. The longer the wires get, the more resistance, the more chance of these burning up. And I'm going to solder in a fuse holder. And I'm also going to make these disconnectable or connectable with these insulated spades, male and female spade connectors. That way I can disconnect stuff when I need to get at things inside. Now, as for knowing what size fuse you should be putting into your circuit, it's really quite easy. When an LED is on at full bright white color, it's going to use 0.06 amps. So all you do is you times that by how many LED strips you have, and that'll give you what your strip takes. Now, for example, the 144 LED side strip times 0.06 is just over 8 amps. Now, if I put an 8 amp fuse into that circuit, there's a chance it might blow. And so there's always usually a buffer on fuses, about 15–20%. So I'm going to round up to 10 amps. Now, I've looked through all my calculations on all my strips for this cabinet. I'm going to pretty much put 10 amps for all of the power injection cables, including the one for the matrix, even though it almost takes like 25 or 30 amps. The reason why is those 3 injection cables are kind of sharing the work because they're wired up in parallel. So 10 amp, 10 amp, 10 amp, that makes the 30. Now, keep in mind that 0.06 is also a bit of a buffer because that is the maximum power at bright white light. And these cabinets are never there. The side strips and matrix, they're usually just kind of off and flashing every now and then, flashing some patterns. And even when the patterns are quite on intensively, they're twinkling and flashing roughly about 50% on off. So you got a little bit of safety buffer there as well. As for figuring out how long your power injection wires need to be, you start with where your power supply is, kind of route your wire like this. In this case, this one's got to go up to my right playfield side strip. So this is going to go up like that. And then I've left myself some extra room here so that I can actually pull the strip up and away from the cabinet, and then I can disconnect this a little bit easier rather than having to get down into there to try to disconnect it. And then once you get your length, go and make your positive and negative black wires, and I put on these insulated female spade connectors to make that connection nice and quick and easy when I need to. Whew, that's all done. Now it's time to hook them up to our strips, and I have marked these so that I can figure out which one goes where as I went and made these. In the power supply video, I actually showed that I was putting the +5 volts over to this terminal block and that the ground was going over there. I'm actually going to get rid of that because I want this to be solely running just the LEDs. That way all of that power is going for that. But what I will do after is I will set up the 5 volt and ground from the ATX power supply to that terminal block. So I still have a 5 volt terminal block. It would just be powering anything else that needs 5 volt, and that'll be off the ATX power supply. There's only 3 5 volt positive spots to screw into the power supply, and then there's 3 ground spots, but I have 6 wires. So all I'm going to do is double up and put 2 wires on each of those terminals. Before we start hooking up this LED matrix, there is one thing we have to check so that we know what to input for a cabinet file in DOF later. So if we flip this over, this side right here is my data inside. Now if you look at the back here, there's some traces here, these little lines. The lines go to the bottom, then they go along the bottom here, and then they join right here. So if I flip this back over, this is actually the first LED for this matrix, and it's going to go start from the bottom and go up, and then it goes to the next one and goes down and alternates and goes across to the left. So this is really important to know when we set this up for our DOF, otherwise we're not going to have this work. Now the other thing is, once I get this in here, I don't want these things wiggling around and moving, and especially in the middle where I have to join the two. So what I'm going to do is basically get it where I want it, and then I'm going to gun this down. I got the wiring set up on this matrix. Now this is where the data is going to come in. This is going to be the 1 injection point for the right side. This is going to be the injection for the middle, and this is the injection for the right. Now, what I did here, in case you're not following along, is I need this data signal to continue all the way to the end. So I didn't clip that, and that's kept together. However, I wanted to have a spade connector, and I wanted to have something kind of symmetrical for the injection. So it made sense to put something right in the middle. That way it'll kind of feed this way, and the other ones will kind of feed to the end and help each other, and it'll be a smooth transition for the power on the end. So the other thing is, I think this ground has to continue for the signal, so it still continues, it just tees in and has a connection for it. So flip it over, I'm going to put that tinted lens back on, and then the only other thing to hook up to this, to the cab, is the data signal JST connector for the channel for the matrix when I get it done. Now for the playfield side strips, the end that goes to the front of the cab, we're not doing any power injection, so we're just going to make sure these are safe. So I'm basically just going to double end itself over back on itself, and then put some heat shrink tube over that on the positive and negative. And then I'm basically going to stick a big piece of heat shrink over the top and just going to cap it so that it's not getting in anybody's way. And then on the other end, where there's the actual power connections for the input side, we're going to put on some male spade connectors so we can connect on there. Now I need something to stop this from moving around down on this end. The other end's kind of trapped by the LED matrix board. So I actually have a little kind of cutaway in the corner of the monitor here. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to use a small little rare earth magnet and a steel nut, and I'm just going to glue gun them in. And that way when they're next to each other, there's a lot of force to grab that together. The other thing you could do, depending on your setup, you might use some double-sided Velcro. But whatever you want to do, you want to make sure that it's easy to get this in and out in case you got to lift the monitor up. And before you put the strips into your cabinet, it's not a bad idea to test them again. Check your new power injection cables, plug them in, use the cable and Teensy Octo setup from the previous video. If you haven't watched that, I'll put a link above to it. And then just open up your Arduino sketch and change how many LEDs for that basic LED test, and then flip it on and see if it works. Now, this is going to test that you haven't had any issues with your soldering or any of your wiring, and you're getting proper power, etc. That way you know this works. And if it doesn't work later, it's got to be something with your DOF setup. All right, now I'm going to take this Cat6 RJ45 wire, and I'm going to solder on 4 separate JST connectors for signal and for ground for the different channels. Now, the channels are orange, blue, green, and brown, and they're in that respective channel order. So orange is number 1, blue number 2, green 3, and brown 4. And remember, the data is the solid color. The white with a stripe of that color is the ground for that channel. So let's go do that. On this Octo board, it's getting its positive and ground through the USB connection, so that's all this needs, and that's all I'm going to do. However, if you want, you can disconnect the USB, and then you have to supply 5 volt and ground from the power supply that's powering up your LEDs. However, if you do that, do not ever plug the USB back in, because you could have some power fluctuations going back to the computer from your power supply. But for our case, we're just going to plug in that micro USB and be good to go. At this point, it doesn't really matter which JST or channel goes to what LED strip or matrix. However, later when you go to do your cabinet file, you're going to need to know which one you plugged in. So make a little mental note so that you can have this for later. Once you've got absolutely everything set up in the cabinet, I highly recommend you go back to that basic LED sketch in Arduino and change the number of LEDs in that line to the channel that has the most number of LEDs. So in my case, that's 512 LEDs, so change it to that. And the reason why you're doing that is in that basic program, it will assume that all of your channels have the same amount of LEDs. So if you only put in like 144, you're not going to see the rest on your matrix. So make sure that it says the most amount per channel that you have, and then give it a test, see how it works. And that way you will know that this entire cabinet is fully working before you start messing around with DOF and wondering why these won't light up. All right, here we go. That's the one side strip. Now remember, it's going to take a lot longer because it's actually thinking out the 512 LEDs. There's the right side, once again, thinking it's 512. There's only 144. And there goes the matrix, and because that's the limit, you'll see it jump to the speakers pretty quick. Bam, there's the speakers. Can't see it, I'll show you in a different view, the back of the back box and then the undercab. Cool. Now, once again, because of the delay, it's because of the amount of LEDs and the amount that are not shown. So it takes a little bit longer. And I think it might actually be showing all 8 possible channels too, so that might be why it's taking a lot longer. However, this does switch and it does go through all the colors. So just make sure that it goes through all the colors on all your LED strips and then you are good to go. That's a wrap in another video from Way of the Wrench, this time on how to install your LED strips and make sure they're working properly so that you're not scratching your head thinking, what have I done, when you're figuring out DOF at the same time. Speaking of which, next video up is going to be a very short one on how to make a cabinet file so that DOF understands what you've done and how many LEDs and per channel and what's what. And then probably make a separate video for actually getting an account and getting DOF set up and getting the tables flashing like they're supposed to. So pretty cool, I'm looking forward to that one. If you haven't already, why don't you join us on Instagram? That would be much appreciated, and that way you can see what's going on in the shop in between videos. Until next time, take it easy.